Welcome to Walk in My Shoes. You have completed session 1. And hopefully you've been made aware of some of the history of our country here in America, especially as it deals with Black history. Now, we don't have to just focus on one people group, but we can start to evaluate how has our country dealt with race, diversity, inclusion. One of the first steps for us to solve any of the problems that we see today is we got to begin to become aware of what some of the realities are. Now, we're going to move into another session, and this next session is really about acknowledgement. Now, I want to help you understand that this is going to be difficult. You're going to feel some feelings like anger, like this is not my fault. I have no part of this. I'm not a racist. You might even feel guilt, shame of maybe some parts that you feel like you have played, whether consciously or unconsciously. I'm going to challenge you not to go no pun intended, black or white. Don't swing on the pendulum of saying someone's fully wrong or someone's fully right. Somehow find a way to find the percentage of what part do you play. You may not be unaware of it. You may not even realize some of the unconscious bias you have. I can't wait for you to meet our guests today as we start to become more aware, but also begin to acknowledge together what it means to walk in someone else's shoes. Hey everyone, I'm excited to introduce to you Dr. Pooja Bambha-Arora. So welcome, Dr. Bamba. How are you?
Good. And yourself, Troy?
I'm doing pretty well. Last week we heard a lot about awareness of our American history, specifically with Black history. But you're sitting here and you're of a different diverse ethnicity, and I'd love you just to tell us about who you are. You're here in America. I would imagine you are voting, and so you're full American. So when people say like, "Where are you really from?" is really not a good question. But talk about yourself. Tell us some of your backdrop and who you are.
Thank you so much, Troy, for having me here. I'm really excited to talk about a lot of issues that, you've touched upon, especially in terms of diversity and race. I came from India in 2005, kind of as a new bride when I got married to my husband. And I was a high school English teacher in India. And after moving here, after some time, I pursued my PhD in education, English education, where I picked up a lot of nuances of American education system. Yeah. And I kind of focused on culturally responsive teaching, taking into consideration race, gender, class issues, and predominantly focusing on race. So I have some research experience in inner city schools in Buffalo, New York, where we moved from. And I did my PhD there as well. I taught at SUNY System, State University of New York at Buffalo, where I graduated from. So I moved with my husband and my daughter to Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Quite the move.
6 years ago, actually, by the end of next month, it'll be 6 years. After I moved here, I started teaching part-time at NWTC, and from this fall, I will start teaching at UWGB in the Department of Education and kind of teaching similar courses with cultural elements. So I consult on the side as a DEI consultant, diversity, equity, inclusion consultant for some nonprofits, which is pretty voluntary at this point. Right. And I'm also the chair of Racial Equity Committee of Brown County, which is also a voluntary position, because I thought I could use my research experience and all those years of grind in PhD to kind of make some impact on policy, on how we can look at the big picture and make that impact.
You've got some great experiences sitting with nonprofits, some for-profits, but a lot of students. What have you seen the barriers? Because if people are made aware of the problem or some of the history in our country, where do you see the barriers with people? Why aren't we moving forward?
It's going to take a long time to come to terms to dismantle all that has been piled upon in terms of racism, starting from, slavery, and when millions of slaves were brought, I guess it was 12 million or something on this transatlantic slave trade. They were kind of kidnapped, brought here. And there is this bias that we all carry to some extent, and I feel we don't tend to acknowledge it. And that's where the problem begins, because it's problematic if we cannot have conversations, and we cannot have conversations if we don't acknowledge that it exists. We just can't bury our head in the sand and pretend that it's not a problem. First of all, we have to acknowledge that it's a problem, and then address it based on that, having conversations, having very, very uncomfortable conversations with nonprofit organizations who are doing this work, reaching out with people of color, with African American, Latino. There's so many organizations, and I feel it's not just them, it's also that white people, that Caucasian people need to come forward and understand what is that one step that they can take in their family by having discussions with their children, with their friends, with their neighbors, and in their workplaces, if they're checking and acknowledging if there are diversity trainings happening, and kind of making that push to take that step to make those trainings happen, which is a start. We don't stop there. We have to see how do we translate those trainings further into action, into policy at the workplace. So I feel like these could be some of the few steps that we as individuals, all of us, can take.
I love the fact that you've talked about practice and that it's going to take training in our families. And the word I keep thinking of is practice. It's like we have to keep doing this over and over and can't think this is just a one-time solve and fix. So talk to us a little bit about, but why is it so hard for us to acknowledge that we have a part in it? And I've, again, read some books myself around racism, and a couple of them I was really offended. They had said, I'm white, so I'm racist. I'm like, well, wait, I'm not, it's either like you're right or wrong in our culture. It's black and white, and it feels very polarizing. And I had a hard time admitting a percentage or a bias. That was really difficult to come to grips with. I'm a part of a systemic issue where I do play a part on some level. But why is that so hard for us?
And thanks for saying that, Troy. I think this is every person at some point, especially every white or Caucasian male especially, sometimes feel that. And I've heard that a lot more from males than females for some reason. I feel when you just talk and just say this word racism, our guards go up. It's like, I don't want to talk about this. And one thing I want to say is that when we are addressing this issue of systemic or institutional racism, it's not just one person's moral flaw or a character flaw that we are pointing at, and people tend to take it very personally. So that's one barrier that we need to kind of get over, that this is not me. I am not defining racism here. This has been, like, for centuries, something that has existed, something that has been beneficial to certain things in the system have been beneficial to one race in particular when it compares to housing, economic issues, getting jobs, getting employment, getting better access to education. So just acknowledging and violence. So I feel it's not one person, it's the whole system in place that is very interconnected. All the institutions are very interconnected. So it's a very it's a really big picture to look at, and not just we tend to take it very personally.
Right.
And we need to take it personally to take action in a positive direction, and not to think, oh my God, I'm racist and I don't know, that's not a good thing, and then we just go in a direction where I'm just frozen and I can't do anything. But rather than switching that narrative to make it our own and say, let's see what we can do about this.
That's really good words. I wonder if part of the problem is, do we see racist being saying I'm a racist as defining or labeling me, or whoever we're calling that? And the picture we have is the only history, whether flawed or a narrative we think of racist, hanging African Americans and putting them at the back of the bus, and these pictures of racism where we think, well, I have nothing to do with that. It's almost like do you believe that we need a new way to define racism, which I love what you're saying. It's not one person's moral failure, it's a system. So we live in maybe a culture of racism that we have a biased part, whether conscious or unconscious. Would that be fair, Dr. Bambha-Arora, to talk about maybe the label seems we need some more education around the word and around what it really means?
So, a few years ago, people kind of found it very difficult to use the word racism and to bring that conversation on the table, because it's very, it was very controversial, and sometimes I feel we get in that whole gamut of being politically correct. What's the best word to say this? And, there are different terminologies that keep getting better and better over the years, but I feel to look at the framework behind that word and understand, because it is what it is in terms of the word racism. So just having that direct approach and to address what is it that the cultural context of it, of how that happened, and when George Floyd incident happened, there was this big question on everybody's mind. How did we get here? How did we get here as a country that has been the foundation for immigrants? Starting from Irish immigrants, from Polish, all of us can trace our ancestry. All of us are immigrants, just to bring that larger picture here. But maybe Native Americans. So just to bring that context that all of us has found a life. This country is providing that foundation for so many people to come together, so many cultures to come together and provide a platform to build their lives from scratch. I hear so many stories when people just came with 2 suitcases, which is also us, and not for economic, more for intellectual reasons. My husband and I pursued our PhDs here. So this country has so much potential to give that to so many people. All of us have brought that whole cultural framework to this country. So why not use it to our advantage and to push that moral, educational, cultural envelope rather than, being regressive and going back and fighting and, over the differences rather than embracing those differences,
Which is so beautiful.
Yeah. So I don't believe in labels. I feel there is just a term that can be very defining and constricting and limiting. So we need to expand our consciousness and think of outside those labels. How do we define ourselves as a country, as people, as humanity? Just a very basic moral question comes into play here.
That's so good. I wonder for the listeners, as you're sitting there, maybe for us to stop using or pointing the finger to say, who is a racist? For us to just all acknowledge we're in a systemic culture of racism, we're trying to almost like pull the weeds out. And that's going to take, again, you said training and practice. So Dr. Bambha-Arora, would you tell us a little bit more about acknowledgement doesn't just happen, again, one time. So we're not sitting there in the room thinking, just acknowledge,
Yeah.
and this is all good, and let's move to the next video. Does acknowledgement take some time? Because when you work with groups, what do you find is the hardest part of getting an organization not even past, but into some of the better work with diversity and inclusion?
You just put it out there beautifully, Troy. I feel acknowledgement is a beautiful, beautiful step, to first say to ourselves that there is a problem here that we're looking at, and acknowledge, yes, how am I contributing to the problem, or am I contributing to the solution? And how can I, if not, how can I move forward to contribute to a solution? What step can I take based on my skill set, my heritage, my neighborhood, my community, to advance this cause further, so that there is better understanding of each other's cultures, there is more assimilation. And I just, it just makes me think, we all talk about culture and we say, I know I have a very good set of diverse friends through my colleague, through so-and-so, and my cousin is married into that family, into Jewish family, Indian family, Native American. But are we ready to break bread with people? That is one big question. Are we ready to have, cultural, even Thanksgiving, are we inviting a diverse set of friends as family to come in and break bread? Because I feel that's where it starts. Are we ready to socialize on a different level, not just at work party or just having coffee, going out? Are we ready to invite them home and break bread with them and just go outside that zone?
I love what you just said there, this whole idea of breaking bread. I mean, I obviously have a faith story myself, and obviously and it doesn't mean everybody does, but I would say many of the faith cultures center around the table.
Yes,
the
a lot. Food.
And it's
Food.
that connection that seems to unfold that is so beautiful and deep. And when I can do that with someone that's different than me, and sadly our culture has created, again, a very polarizing environment where we say love everybody, but then we want to cancel out people who don't fit our narrative.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about are there some consistence or I would say common denominators for people that get stuck?
I do feel like we all have this common tendency to just stay in our own spaces of belongingness, my church, my temple,
Yes.
my set of friends, and my just kind of, and it can come across as very cliquey. And there's research about Wisconsin in general that so many times businesses don't want to come here, millennials don't want to live here, because there's a certain cliquiness to the culture here that if you have not lived here for generations, you are always an outsider. So I feel that is one common denominator where we get outside our comfort zones. How do we take that step to not just stick to our spaces of belongingness, and just get out and make friends with different cultures? How do we socialize? How do we impact our hiring decisions as corporates and that needs to come at the top leadership, and there's research that shows that most of the top leadership in corporates are white people. So the framework they're coming across in terms of hiring also is taking into consideration mainstream packaged leadership.
Right.
And to that point, so many times the way artificial intelligence is designed when they hire people is also very biased. Yeah. There is data that shows that if I put my name as a Caucasian sounding person, there are 10 times more chances that I will be called and invited. And I give this example a lot for myself, when I reached to a career counselor here in Wisconsin, and she said to me, you have this PhD, you're looking for a job, everything looks great on your resume. Did you ever consider changing your name to Amy or Jennifer and put it on your resume? And that was hurtful.
Yeah.
In that very moment, I just thought all my hard work and perseverance and grit and the, as an immigrant, what I did to settle here, it's all just has come to this, that I have to make my name Caucasian sounding to fit in with the culture, and sort of just diminishing everything else, like all that, my research or whatever. It just made me feel, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And many cultures are doing that just to do that, to get a job. So I feel like we need to grow over that mindset when we are making those kind of microaggressions and at people, and just diminishing them, that you need to fit in and make them go through that pressure to adapt and be more Caucasian sounding. And when it comes to diverse leadership, going back to the hiring decision point, I was saying we need to have more representation everywhere, because if we don't, and they might bring a different style of leadership, and we need to accept that.
Yeah.
We just don't have to operate everything, looking at the white mindset and how it's done. And, the UN general, the one before, he said very beautiful thing one time when I was listening to him on radio. He said, if there are 5 people looking at a problem and all 5 of them come from different countries, different cultures, and they sit down to address a problem, there will be 5 beautiful solutions that you'll be looking at, as compared to 5 white people sitting, or 5, homogenous, any culture looking at something. So this is the beauty of diversity. This is the beauty of moving forward with acceptance of every culture, and looking at all the newer skill set, all the newer styles, all those celebrations, all the food that they are bringing with them. Can we change our mindset and look at that?
Yeah, you said so many great things in here. So just to draw back some and just comments. First of all, obviously, I'm a transplant to Wisconsin. I'm actually born in Hawaii, grew up in Los Angeles.
Okay.
So I would agree with you. My wife is from here, and she has 51 first cousins. So there is this sense, especially on holidays in Wisconsin, if you don't have family here, you're kind of left out. And we've heard people that work with us here at the church, but that they say they feel very lonely and left out. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if some of that comes from the different cultures that have immigrated. You have largely German, some French, some Polish, and they kind of cluster into that family environment. Mm-hmm. You said something else, so I think is very interesting, the name change. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to walk in your shoes and think, if I moved to India, and they said, Troy Murphy is just so white, you're not going to get a job. Yeah. Can you change it to an Indian name? Yeah. Right? And I keep thinking...
Taran. Can you change it into Taran, Troy?
Yeah. So it would be like,
Anand.
Oh my gosh, I would feel like this is not really me, but I have to pretend to be somebody else in order to be accepted. I'm seeing how that would feel very aggressive and hurtful. Mm-hmm. And it's just, again, practicing this as I'm talking this out loud to you. When you hear stories like Dr. Bambha-Arora is saying, I think it's for us to think about what would that be like for you to feel that. And that's just empathy. But I want to go back to, I think, this idea of fear. I wonder if some of our inability to invite somebody new to our table is some of the aggression wrapped around fear.
Many people say to me, like, I remember being the only Indian family, Caucasian, like we would take our daughter for soccer here in Howard, and and I would be the only one making that effort to talk to all the people, and there was hardly anyone who came and talked to me, and that's pretty much the case. And sometimes I'm actually exhausted with that I'm making efforts to have people over for my daughter's birthday, for play dates, or having people. I even invite them for Diwali, which is the Indian New Year. So, and they sometimes one person said to me on that soccer play field, like another parent, he said, I don't know anything about your culture. I don't want to say anything wrong, and please don't mind, but I just can't talk to you.
Oh.
And I thought, gosh, you are putting me on a pedestal and saying that you can't talk to me because you don't know nothing about my culture. And I said, just say anything wrong, but just say it. It's time we start talking, saying something wrong. I get the intention.
Yes.
I get the intention of the person, of what you're trying to say, why you're saying it. You want to learn more about me, so just say it. It's time we say things wrong and then learn from it rather than not saying at all. And that's what I tell people. So many people, actually, this is true, that have told me personally that they find it hard to interact with other cultures, and that leads to, making them feel ostracized. Why don't we switch that narrative in our minds and think, let me be a learner here. Let me ask questions. I'm always happy to talk about Indian food, telling them which Indian restaurants to go to. If they want recipes, I think it's a great conversation starter, although that should not always be the conversation. I'm my own person too, so I love to be a cultural ambassador. I'm also about myself, ask about me, what I do, my family, and what is it that I'm doing on the weekend. What are my hobbies, interests? Like, there's so many things as conversation starters that you can come up with, but just make that step.
If I were to go to India tomorrow, would I experience some of what you're talking about here? Would it be different?
Oh, racism exists everywhere. In so many countries, there has been Holocaust, there has been exodus with Hindu-Muslim riots in India. Based on religion, like, it's everywhere. Yeah. It's not just US, it's all over the world. Which is a superior race, which is a better religion. Like, we're always fighting for this very thing at the core rather than embracing the beauty of other person's individuality. How do we stop that narrative and switch it? And I feel it's not just us, sometimes media, sometimes there's this messaging we get from our parents, sometimes history, how it has been told to us also matters.
Right. You gave two gifts to me, and I think to everybody just in that answer, which I think are brilliant. I want to make sure people pick up on this. One, you said racism is an issue throughout our history, our world history, and it's all over the world, which shouldn't allow us to go absolve us of the issue, but it actually normalizes this isn't just America. So it makes it feel a little bit lighter to me. Not lighter, and we still need to be aggressively trying to tackle this in our own lives. The second gift, what I love you said is, I do have fear if someone's very different than me of, I don't want to mess that up. And I love what you said is, go ahead and say something and mess it up. That was like a gift, because I have been in situations. I've been to Angola prison in Louisiana where most of the guys there are on death row. They're going to die there. There's an intimidation of, I don't want to mess up and say something wrong to them. Now, I know that's an interesting example, but I say that because there's fear. But I love, again, what we're saying. Dive in. Yeah. You're not going to be able to begin to work through this in your own life until you, again, we're going to say, you invite someone to the table for a meal and get ready to mess it up, because you probably will. I mean, even asking you, like, Dr. Bambha-Arora saying, how do I pronounce your name? How do I, where are you from? Yeah. Like, is there a right way to say that? Can I say that you're Indian? Maybe I shouldn't say that. And there's all this fear. And I don't have this perfected. I'm still trying to figure it out myself. But those are some of the real issues it seems like that you're dealing with, both with personal, consulting, but also these corporate ones. Dr. Bambha-Arora, would you give us just some last thoughts? There's listeners here, they've heard so much good stuff from you, but what would you leave people with like encouragement? How do you encourage people, no matter where they're at, sitting and listening to this, what would you encourage them in this issue of acknowledging that there's a problem and moving forward?
Well, you said it yourself, to dive in. Get started. Make a new friend from a different culture, invite them over, hang out with them, get to know about their culture. And we have fear of the unknown. All of us carry that fear of unknown for the first day of a new job, moving to a new city, just traveling to a new country. It's like trying a new food. We all go through some level of anxiety when we take all those decisions, so why not here? We all have the right framework and the right intention within us. We are wired that way to talk to people, and COVID taught us that. We are not supposed to live in an island or in isolation, and that was hurtful for people's mental health. So why not use this opportunity to engage ourselves more with the community, with different people, and not worry about labels or what am I doing wrong. Just be natural, go out there. Even if you mess up, it's okay. Yeah. It's okay to have uncomfortable conversations. It's okay to have difficult conversation. The thing to pat on your back is that you are taking a step, that you're doing something about it, and questioning, within the HR of your organizations about the trainings, the decisions that they are making. And if you see something wrong, standing up for that. Just make your voice count in any sort of engagement. If you have, just engaging with media, asking them questions of how they are presenting the news, anything that you feel that you would like to do that is, something that reflects based on your skill set, do that. I would always, I teach that too, but I tell my other colleagues at TC, or in general, let's just have some icebreaker related to people's diversity, just some fun thing that they can talk about as teachers, what you can do, as doctors, what you can do, as pastors, what you can do. What can we do to have that dialogue to begin with and make our conversations more dialogic, so it's a two-way traffic. And also, when we start questioning the government, start thinking about how are we changing that landscape. I feel we're growing. There's a lot of good movement that's happening from the government standpoint, from communities' awareness. So I feel we are headed in a good, positive direction. But let's not have hate within us. There's so much hate out there. Let's just change that for a change. Let's just spread the message of love, and let's see how we can get past our shells and our those homogenous spaces where we just have those very personal Thanksgivings, very personal Christmases. Let's go out and invite someone that doesn't look like us. We are not colorblind, but we can all choose to go outside and just blend more with people. And why not? Yeah. And why not now?
You said something in this interview that I just want to pick up, is that I think part of acknowledgement is acknowledge that people are human, and there's a beauty in all humanity. No matter their morality, no matter their diversity, no matter where they're from, there's something about the mosaic of humans.
Yes.
And if we can begin to walk in those shoes and understand their stories, their pain, their joy, their culture, wow, it'll just grow who we are.
Yeah. We're all waiting to grow as humans, spiritually, professionally, personally, and I feel now is the chance. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.